years ago after the golf course closed, and we worked through the master plan with Brisbane City Council's consultation, and at no time, never, was a stadium mentioned during those 5 years. And we know that before the last council election, the Lord Mayor Adrian Shinner said no stadium in Victoria Park. Now you will have seen him, I know, and since that time, in the last 12 months, saying, yeah, okay, we can have a stadium. And I'm telling you, I will never forget or forgive him for that. Can I? Yes, thank you. Can I also say that our group is not against the Olympic and Paralympic Games. We have never spoken out against the Games. We're certainly not against sport. Oh, the amount of cricket and tennis I've watched over the summer, nobody could accuse us of being anti-sport, but they do. But we are vehemently opposed to a stadium in this beautiful place. You'll see some yellow ribbons around on trees. I'd like to point this one out over here. It's actually called Melaleuca leucadendra, which means weeping paper bark. So I hope that's not a portent of what's to come. They are merely symbolic. We know that we don't know that these trees are going to be lost, right? They're a symbol because we know that through construction there will be trees lost. So we're going to make them the no trees. And if you want to get a photo with your family, your dogs, whomever you've brought with you today, to post up on Facebook, that's a really great photo op there. Just a couple of acknowledgements for people who've been wonderful to us. David Hinchcliffe sends his apologies. He's working today. And as many of you know, David is a very talented local artist and a strong supporter of the campaign. And I'd like to thank him publicly here for his generous support in donating not one, but two original paintings that he's actually painted in the park. We've already auctioned, yes, thank you. We may need to doing this probably, but still, needs to be said. And we've already auctioned one, and you'll see one up there near the barbecue. If you're interested in art, auction it for that one is still open, closes tomorrow afternoon at 5. If you have any spare cash or you want to donate to our group, seriously, no donation is too small. We've got a bank account now, we're big time. Don't laugh, it was hard to get too. Yeah, look, that's what keeps us going. Most of it is volunteer stuff, but we've bought the badges, we're giving those away, and I see you all wearing them. That's fantastic. Make sure you keep wearing them. I wear mine down to the shops, and people say, "What's with Buick Park?" And I go, "Huh? Oh," and then I have a chat with them. Also the car stickers. So I've got 2 on my car. So thank you to David. Could I also acknowledge Brett Levy, who is here somewhere. Brett, somewhere there, lost him. He's probably not going to like this either. But Brett, I'd like to acknowledge your support for our campaign. And amongst many things, Brett is a very talented person who puts together these amazing virtual reality, and I know I'm not supposed to call them videos, but they're embedded in QR codes, and you'll see it up there. And there's a map on the ground of the country, and you can click on your phone and actually go for a virtual walk through this area of Barrambin in the 1820s. It's amazing. So don't leave without having a go at that. It's wonderful. So thank you so much, Brett. We appreciate that very much. Can I also acknowledge and thank our 3 local elected members who are all here today for their practical and moral support. Seal Chong Wah, who's the Brisbane City Councillor, and her Paddington Ward staff have been terrific. They've been helping us with the bookings to the park, lending us gear like the PA and the megaphone. I'm going to be on the megaphone later. Look out. And the pop-ups. So thank you, Seal. To Grace, long-time local state member who's helped us certainly over the last 5 years. Thanks so much, Grace. As we've wended our way through the complexities of all the state government policies and procedures and so on that are connected with the park, because this is actually owned by the state government, but there is a deed of grant in trust to Brisbane City Council. So it's pretty tricky sometimes. So thank you, Grace, so much for that. Stephen Bates is also here. Stephen is our local federal member, and his team have supported us over the past few years with lots of stuff. You need to really thank him, okay, because his staff are putting on the barbecue today. So, okay, that's really important. Thank you, Stephen. Now, look, these local members are from different political parties. There's going to be some high-profile people speaking today that you will also know and heard of. Different political parties. We know, they have different political opinions about various things, but they are absolutely solid and united in their support for the Save Victoria Park campaign. And we can't thank you guys enough for that, because it's really important for us to know we have that support. Lastly, I'd like to thank the Save Victoria Park team. It's actually a really big team these days. We've got many people who've helped and worked with us over the years, and you'll see a lot of them here today, some of them in high vis, all of them with badges and black shirts. But I want to make a special shout out today to Viv and Rose, who are the other members of the steering group and have been with this campaign right from January 2020. I actually think we spend more time together than we do with our families these days. So thank you to Rose and Viv especially for that. Thank you. Okay, I reckon it's Shut Up Sue time. So I'm going to call on our first speaker now, who I think, tell me, Campbell, if this is right, the first and only person who's been both the Lord Mayor of Brisbane and the Premier of Queensland. Is that right? Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's hear it for Campbell Newman, who is an amazing supporter of this campaign.
Thanks very much, Sue. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, as Sue has said, thank you so much for coming out on a Saturday. It's a difficult time for families, and yet there's a lot of people here. It was terrific to have a welcome to country this morning. And the reason is that this is culturally significant land for Aboriginal people. And that must be remembered as we go forward in this battle. They were here first, and the land just behind me, down in the lower ground, it's historically recorded by the first white settlers. That was a very special place for Aboriginal people. But it's also a special place in terms of the history of white settlement. And it's interesting because so many people that I know and move around this town with who think that I'm literally, I was told yesterday by my former Chief of Staff that I was wrong to be saying no to Victoria Park and a stadium. Well, he's wrong, and indeed there are so many people at the moment who've got the wrong idea. Because in 1864, 300 acres of land was set aside as a park and for recreational purposes for the people of Brisbane for all time. That's at a time where the city of Brisbane probably numbered only 20 to 30,000 people. They had the foresight to set aside land to be the green heart, the lungs of the city, never knowing, by the way, that it would ever become such an amazing place. But what's happened since then? Those 300 acres have been chipped away, salami sliced away, for a whole range of great and positive ideas. A university, a busway, an inner city bypass, an R&A ground, a tunnel control centre. Sorry about that one. Ladies and gentlemen, there is always a great idea. There's always a proposal that will be put forward in the public interest. But as I've come to realise, ultimately you have to take a stand because you have no parks. Great cities need great infrastructure, but great cities have fantastic parks as well. The people who had the foresight in 1864 to set this land aside were inspired by the creation of Central Park in New York and the parks movement in the United Kingdom. They didn't do this by accident. They meant this to be set aside for all time, and now we have, frankly, a rabid move to throw all that out the door. Now, the IOC say that the Olympic City should be focused on legacies, legacy infrastructure. That means creating something positive where something didn't exist before. And I look around the world at cities that have held an Olympics. The argument's been put up for destroying this park. How would they have played out in London? Did the Londoners back in 2012 say, well, Hyde Park, great public transport connectivity, right in the inner city, showcasing London, and plonk their Olympic Stadium there? No, they did not. We've just seen the 2024 Paris Olympics. They didn't put their stadium in the Bois de Boulogne or the Luxembourg Gardens.
No.
And when Sydney held the Olympics in 2000, again with the same arguments the proponents are putting forward, we would see a stadium in the Domain in Sydney, again, close to public transport. Just think of the connectivity and the spectacle. Ladies and gentlemen, it's absurd. The idea about leaving a legacy is to take a piece of degraded land, a piece of industrial land, a brownfield site, and create something worthy to take a city forward. As my own daughter has said to me in the last 24 hours, Dad, they booked the London Olympic Stadium in Hackney Wick, and there is now a vibrant community around that. That's about leaving a legacy. That's about vision. Destroying public open space is not. Now, I'm sorry to say that I fear at the moment we perhaps are in the minority, and we have some work to do to convince people that this place is worthy of saving. And indeed it is worthy of saving. So I'm asking you today to get behind the campaign, talk to your friends and your neighbours, your work colleagues, and actually explain to them the background I've just articulated and what you'll hear from other speakers, because it's so important. I have people saying to me, oh, no one goes there. Well, they haven't been able to go there because it's been a golf course since the 1940s and 50s. And sadly, a Lord Mayor who had the vision 4 or 5 years ago to make a stand and say, I'm going to return this in line with the original 1864 vision, sadly, he seems to have been swept up in this whole sort of push towards a stadium here, because it was a great vision. This can be the Central Park of Brisbane. I guess my final point here is this. We don't have too many inner city parks in this city. We've got less park space than Sydney or Melbourne or Perth, for example, or of course Adelaide. And that's why, again, in a context where there'll be tens of thousands of more people living in the next few decades, only a few kilometres around where we're now standing, we need to save this park. Suncorp Stadium was once Lang Park. It was the people of Paddington and Petrie Terraces local park. Do they have a park anymore? No, they do not. Down here at Perry Park, that's been semi-appropriated by another sporting code. Just over the way in Ballymore, a fair bit of that park's been taken over as well by rugby union. I could go on. It's been really interesting and sad to see that since this proposal, other sporting codes have jumped on the bandwagon and said, oh, we'd like to go there too, which just bells the cat. Once you get a stadium here, they will take over the whole damn place. My final point is this. We are going to fight this, ladies and gentlemen, are we not? One thing the Olympics do not have is time now. The state government do not have time, the council do not have time, and we're going to work every day to slow this down, to delay, to obstruct, and make sure that this is the last place that you would want to put a stadium. So let us work together, let us maintain a degree of rage, but be very deliberate and clinical in how we do this, and let us save our park. Thank you.
Thank you, Campbell. That's fantastic, and that's cheered me up, that's for sure. So can I just ask Ruth, it's Dr. Ruth Barker who's going to speak to us next. Ruth, well, I'll let you tell them. Yeah. I met her years ago up at the school, would you believe? There you go.
Okay. Well, that's a little bit of a hard act to follow. Thanks, Campbell. And you won't know me, but some of you might have seen me on the telly. I'm an emergency paediatrician by trade. I've lived in Brisbane for 40 years. I went to UQ here. I moved into the Hurston area 22 years ago, and I live just up there off Hurston Road near Ballymore. Firstly, I just want to talk a little bit about logistics. So I used to work at the Mater Children's Hospital, and I lived through the chaos of the construction and the commissioning of the Queensland Children's Hospital. And any of my colleagues here who work at QCH or the Mater know what an absolute parking nightmare it was, and it still is, around that area, not to mention the traffic and the gridlock getting in and out. When you couple that with some of the performances and shows that are on just down the road at the convention centre, it can be really crippling. And parking may not sound like a really big issue, but it is a big issue. The park here is right next to the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital, 1,000-bed hospital. I did my basic training at Royal Brisbane. It has 9,000 staff and runs 24 hours a day. And that's just the staff. So there are all the patients, the visitors, all the other people who come and go from the hospital. We all know, if you live in this area, how insane it is to get a park within the hospital precinct. When you then add in the pressure from the university and the school, my son went up here to Kelvin Grove State College. That's where I met Sue at the PNC. She's a force to be reckoned with. You realise what the parking pressure is like. Add on to... Can you still hear me? Add on. Look out. Okay. Can you hear me now? 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 No. It was working before. Now?
I reckon try this one. Is this loud enough? Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Yes! Okay, where was I? Okay, it might sound like a really stupid issue, parking. But the people who are trying to park at the hospital, it's not,
Out again.
can you hear? Yeah?
Yeah.
It's not just the doctors. Doctors often have protected parking, right? It's the nurses, the patients, the people who are trying to visit, the people who are the worst paid staff at the hospital who are trying to save money. They can't afford the parking lots to park there, and so they're looking for street parking. The pressure is insane. Hands up if you live in the area and you know what it's like when there's a game on down at Ballymore Park and uni's back and school's back. It's crazy. At the Queensland Children's Hospital, we were reassured that the parking issues would be resolved, but they weren't. Even after the hospital was commissioned, we've had staff who are trying to come on shift to work the resus shift at 3 p.m. in the emergency department, and they're driving around the car park, because you can't get street parking for love nor money there. They're driving around the car park for half an hour to find a park to come on shift to work in the resus bay. It's just ludicrous. So all these things never get mentioned and discussed. It's just going to put enormous pressure on the infrastructure that we already have here. And as Campbell has said, the park's being chipped away and chipped away and chipped away by great ideas, but there's little consideration for the volume of people coming in and out and the people that need to get here by car. The other issue I wanted to raise is the benefits of the park. Now, we've heard about how green space is really beneficial to us, and there's a lot of information about greenery indoors is beneficial to our mental health. There's better evidence to suggest that immersion in green spaces gives you an extra boost, and that's what you can get in a place like this, not by a few trees planted in the concrete as landscaping around a great big stadium. The other issue is, apart from the oxygen that we're all breathing while we stand here, I see you all crowded underneath the trees in the shade. So the big issue is cooling. We, particularly those of us who live in this area, get benefit from the cooling of the trees, the air conditioning. Now, Campbell mentioned Central Park. That has 5 times the space of what we have here at the moment. Any of you who've been to Rio may have visited the Christ the Redeemer statue. There's a magnificent tropical rainforest on the hill underneath the Christ the Redeemer statue. In the 1800s, that hill was completely denuded by farming, and as a consequence, the early settlement of Rio baked. It was way too hot, they had really poor water quality, and so there was a decree that the whole place had to be replanted. 100,000 trees replanted on that hill, and in 1967 it was designated as a national park, and now it's a national treasure. And what people won't realise is that reforestation around Rio is continuing because they're suffering from ongoing heat waves. So I say that we really need to maintain this green space, not only for our mental health, not just because of the logistics, but we're in desperate need of cooling in the face of climate change. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Our next speaker is John Brannock. John, where are you hiding? Here he comes somewhere. There he is. So John is another person who's multi-talented, heritage advisor, and certainly former chair of the Queensland Heritage Council.
Thank you, Sue. Campbell's already alluded to it. In 1864, the proposal was put that Victoria Park become a park. In 1875, it was actually gazetted by the colony of Queensland. And two of the striking things about it, as mentioned in the Parliament at the time, was that they were focused on the expansion of the city of Brisbane. So it should have a breathing space. And we wanted a space to be the lungs of the city. So they put forward 300 acres, or that's 130 hectares, today's language. That's now been whittled down, and it's been whittled down to about 64 hectares. Now of that, just to let you know, there is altogether 26 hectares already listed on the State Heritage Register. A lot of that will be affected by a stadium if it goes into Victoria Park, and a new application's been put in by Dr. Neil Peach as part of this organisation, and for another 38 hectares. Now it's funny, you know, it's almost the same grounds who've been given. As you've heard quite well, the Aboriginal history is quite significant here. The Yakadaki, the Yorks Hollow, all the way up through here. It was Pullen and Bora rings, and very much a meeting place. That is the Indigenous side. I leave that to the others to talk about. On the white heritage side, there's been many changes to that 130 hectares, that it's now coming down to 64 hectares. it will be, or rather we have been notified through Neil, that it will be heritage listed, because that will be the recommendation of the department. As you know, there are, thank you Neil, I can't see you, but a lot of work there by a lot of people. He's got a great backing, has piecemealed the heritage of this place. And the public servants, we do know, independently, are very much behind it. Now, worldwide parks, those legacies of Olympic cities, Stanley Park, Vancouver, it is altogether, let's see, 405 hectares. None of that was taken by the Winter Olympics. Hyde Park, Kensington Gardens, it's been mentioned in 1908, 1948, and then in 2012. No one in London dared suggest 253 hectares be whittled down a bit. And one of the most often quoted signature parks as a legacy to a city all on its own is actually Central Park of 340 hectares. That is 5 times what currently this Victoria Park's all about. And you know, New York City has never held an Olympics. You know why? They never wanted to chop away at Central Park. Now, the bastion of how to make money in New York City, they weren't even willing to chip away at Central Park. Now, the IAC prioritises, we know, a couple of other things: sustainability and reuse of existing buildings. And that is exactly what Campbell alluded to. In Paris, they left the parks alone. Just to put it in perspective, because I'm a lifelong town planner with a heritage bent and environmental bent, I worked out if you overlay the Optus Stadium, which is apparently the same size as the proposed Arcadis Olympic Stadium proposed for here, if you overlay that, it will take up 70% of Victoria Park this side of Yorks Hollow. Where's, for the long term, the transport from a fixed rail? You know, with Suncorp, even though it was a park, it cannot work if it wasn't for transportation through fixed rail. 950 metres to get to any fixed rail station from here. I say let them bring up things like PPPs or private-public partnerships, or really it's private, as we all know. That's how they end up. It will not be open to the public. And of course, a planning tenet is once you've got most of something, the rest is easy to fall. We've got to fight this all the way. Sue and I said we'll chain ourselves to a tree. I'm serious. I think she's serious. I hope you'll join us. One more thing. We have on our team one of Australia's 3 leading King's Counsels, who is an expert in planning and environment, administrative law, and civil rights. He is a Queenslander. Can you hear me?
No.